Welcome to You Are Not a Frog, the podcast for GPs, doctors and other professionals in high-stress jobs. Working in today's pressured environment, you may feel like a frog in boiling water. Things have heated up so slowly that you might not have noticed the extra long days becoming the norm. You've got used to feeling constantly busy and often one crisis away from not coping. Let's face it, frogs only have two options: to stay in the pan, be boiled alive, or to hop out and leave. But you are not a frog, and that's where this podcast comes in. You can do more than just hop out or burn out. There are simple changes that you can make which will make a huge difference to your stress levels and help you enjoy life again. I'm your host, Dr. Rachel Morris, GP turned executive coach, speaker, specialist in workplace resilience and creator of the Shapes Toolkit training programme. In the podcast, I'll be chatting with friends, colleagues and experts, all who have an interesting take on this stuff, so that together we can take back control and thrive. If you want more resources, including CPD reflection forms for the podcast, then make sure you've signed up to the You Are Not a Frog Collective, and please share these podcasts with anyone who needs them. On with the episode. So it's absolutely brilliant to have with me today Corrina Gordon Barnes. And Corrina, I think you need to introduce yourself because I just won't do it justice.
So I live in Cambridge. I'm a coach. My son died last year. He was premature and he died during labour. And at that point, I was so very grateful to have a process called the work, which is a way of being with the stories we tell ourselves about life and what's happening and what should be happening instead. And because I already had the work kind of in me as a process, it meant that I've been able to navigate that particular crisis with a tremendous amount of peace. And so it therefore, when we come to this COVID-19 situation, it kind of feels similar. It feels like another period of collective grief and collective crisis, and a lot of this should not be happening. That's like the main kind of thought running for me when Alfie died, and for us all now. This shouldn't be happening. This is a bad thing. I want something different from this to be happening. So I'm just grateful that I already had the work. It got me through that. It's helping me through this. And I'm going to have to do the bump picture. Nearly 35 weeks pregnant with our second son. And, that has its own challenges in terms of what's birth going to look like in a pandemic situation? What's postpartum going to look like? What is this final stage of antenatal care going to look like? We've had lots of extra care because of this being a rainbow pregnancy. So yeah, all of it is just about navigating the moment by moment, and really happy to share some of that with you.
Thank you. So I thought it'd be really useful for our listeners to hear from you, because Dr. Caroline Walker and myself have been doing podcasts around how to manage your stress and anxiety through the COVID crisis. And one of the things we've been talking about is when we have these thoughts, whether you sort of fuse with them, pay attention to them or not. And I wanted to delve a bit deeper into that, because I think that's really key. But you can't be too glib about it, and you can't just say, well, you've had this bad thought, don't fuse with it, just ignore it. And I wanted to talk to someone who literally one of the worst things has happened to, yet you've used this process to get yourself through it, and talk to you about how we can take parts of this process and use them ourselves when we are not, well, let's just say we're not even just having these bad thoughts, but actually we're seeing this awful stuff that's happening, and we're dealing with people who are losing loved ones. We're having to make difficult decisions, and we're having to, deal with ourselves when maybe we're losing loved ones as well.
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
I know that you've been offering some webinars around peace during a pandemic. What is it that you've been talking to people about, particularly during this time?
Yeah, it's interesting because there've been global Zoom events. Myself and a colleague who so happens to be a global health expert, so she's coming with a lot of, very lived experience of this. And people from around the world have been joining us, and it's fascinating to hear what each individual person is dealing with. Is it that their partner has a respiratory condition and they're terrified that they're going to die? Is it someone who, a dear friend of mine, of ours, who's a doctor and who desperately wants to be in the hospital working, but has her own health condition that means she can't. She has to be at home for 12 weeks. And that is incredibly frustrating. Every single person bringing something, whether they were about to leave a relationship and now feel that they can't, and that they're actually living with this person who, you know, they don't want to be living with, has to live with potentially for months more. Yeah, so everything. And so what we do, the process of the work is about two phases really: identifying the stories that are running and then questioning them. Because there are the circumstances. So for example, right now my grandma has coronavirus. She's literally about to die. I'm gonna get the call any moment.
Oh, sorry.
She's in South London. Yeah. And no one of the family will be able to visit her, and the hospital so that's what's happening. That's the reality of grandma has COVID-19. Grandma will die within hours or days. We won't be able to see her. That's the circumstances. That's not what actually causes pain. The bit that causes pain is this should not be this way. We should be able to be there with her. She'll die alone, and suffer because of that. We won't get to say goodbye. It's all the stories that go on top of the circumstances that actually cause the pain. So what we do is we get those thoughts onto paper. Okay. So for example, in that situation, my grandma has COVID-19, and that means that. So I might write down, and that means that she's suffering, and that means that I'll never get to say goodbye. And it's those thoughts that I can actually sit with and question. And there's a very structured way for doing that, if you want me to go into it in detail.
Yeah, let's go. Are you happy to go through it and just talk through that circumstance? I'm so sorry about your grandma. It's just
thank you. Yeah,
terrible. But tell it. Talk us about how you deal with that.
Super beloved grandma. So we call her Oma. She's from Germany originally. So let's say let's say the bit that's most painful to me is that she's suffering. So I take that thought, she's suffering. My beloved Oma. I'm picturing her on a bed alone, with all the symptoms of the illness. And the first thing I want to do is I want to question the truth of my assumption. So I sit there and I literally ask, is that true? Can I absolutely know it's true that in this moment she's suffering? And I might notice certain images come to me. Maybe I'm noticing her, struggling for breath or crying out, and I just notice, okay, so they're images. I don't know that that's what's happening. So can I know for sure that she's suffering? And in my particular situation there, I might look at it and go, no, I can't know that for sure. I don't know that this is a true statement. All I know is that she's in hospital and she has this condition. So straight away, it creates that kind of curiosity and openness. Like, okay, I don't know if my story is true. Let's run a parallel situation as well. I'm also thinking about giving birth in a few weeks. And the thought is, my wife won't be able to be there. Won't be able to be there a few hours after the birth. Again, I sit with, do I know that that's true? Is that definitely a true statement? Can I predict the future enough to know that for sure she won't be there? Again, no, I can't know that. I couldn't put my life on that being a fact. So it doesn't mean that we're saying it's not true. It just we don't know if it's true. And we just look at how many times in our life we assume that something is true just because we've had the thought, and so we think, right, well, that's true. But to just introduce a little bit of, I don't know. And then once we've done that, what I call the truth test, we then look at what is the impact, the cost of believing this particular thought. So let's go with my Oma. I'm imagining her there. I'm imagining her suffering. I'm thinking she's suffering. And then how do I react? I feel maybe my shoulders go up, my chest constricts. I kind of feel like, I want to close in on myself. So I'm noticing what's the physical response that I have when I play that story. I notice that I don't respond to my dad's email about her because I'm in that story. I'm not able to respond. I'm just noticing, I'm just witnessing, okay, this is what I do. Maybe I reach for Facebook as a diversion, as a distraction. Maybe I lose myself on Instagram. Maybe I reach for a chocolate biscuit or a, nice big baguette or something, kind of comfort food. Each person will respond in their own way. And I really just look at that. Okay, so this is what happens when I believe a thought that I have already shown myself that I don't know if it's true. And does any of that reaction actually serve me in any way? Does it do any good? Does it have any productive, healthy impact? No, it just seems to restrict me or disconnect me or have me kind of step out of my experience. And then I move to, okay, so now let's just imagine, now that I've seen how expensive the story is, this not even necessarily true story, I've seen how expensive it is to me, to my body, to my relationships, to my capacity to have kind of power or impact. Okay, so who would I be right in this moment, imagining my Oma without the thought she's suffering? So again, I'm not knowing that she's not, but just if that wasn't the story that I was playing. As soon as that layer is removed, already I can just feel the love for her. I can bring back the flood of memories of these years. What am I, 40 something? 40, 40 years of memories of this beautiful woman. And so those memories then start to kind of elevate in my mind above the fictional image, because I haven't seen it, the fictional image of her suffering in a hospital bed alone. And I can connect with those. And then maybe I reply to my dad, oh, lovely Oma, remembering this moment with her, or let's all think of her, or let's all share on our family email, our favorite memories of her. I step into something that I can do that actually feels healthier, more empowered, more useful, more loving, more compassionate. Nothing's changed about my Oma. She's still in that exact same situation, but I'm having a completely different experience, and one that is more likely to be of service to me, to my family, and potentially to her if there was something that I could actually do for her. Maybe I phone the hospital. Maybe I suddenly realize, oh, I can phone the hospital. They say no visitors, but I could phone them and ask them to pass on this, this little very kind of Corrina message that only she and I would share, or something like that. So I really see that, okay, with the thought, this is who I am. Without the thought, I'm so much more. And nothing has needed to change in the actual circumstances. So that's the questioning part, and then we move to the final stage, which is around turning the thought around. Shall I go there, or did you? Yeah.
Before we go to that, Corrina, can I just ask, what if that thought is true?
Oh.
Okay, so what if you found out she was in a lot of pain, or the other example you gave was if Sam can't be with you at the birth, and it came out tomorrow saying, right, no birth partners for the next 6 weeks. What if it was true? Does that change this process in any way?
No, it doesn't. It doesn't at all, because that's still the reality. So reality is going to rule because it's reality.
Yep.
Me arguing with reality isn't going to change it.
No.
Unless there's actually something that I can do about it. If that is the reality, that's not the bit that's going to be causing my pain. The bit that's going to cause my pain is I need Sam there. I need my wife there. Otherwise, labour's going to be harder. She's not going to bond with our son. Something terrible is going to happen. I'm going to feel completely overwhelmed. Like, all of that is actually the bit that hurts me. It's the stories I put on top of the circumstances.
Okay, so you start questioning slightly different thoughts.
Yeah, you question the bit that argues with reality.
Yeah.
The bit that's like a tantrum against life, where you're like, life, you should not be doing this. You should not be taking my grandma. You should not be, restricting my wife's access to her son's birth. Because that's the argument that has no use. It just causes pain.
Okay. So if you were, do you mind if we go back to your grandma and her suffering?
And if let's say my grandma's in pain, she's in pain, actually in itself isn't the problem. It's she shouldn't be in pain.
Okay.
If I see really clearly she's in pain, maybe I can ask for more morphine, or I can do something around that circumstance without being in resistance to it, without being in that argument with
Hang on, that's not fair. She shouldn't be doing it. Sorry, she shouldn't be suffering.
Absolutely, she shouldn't be in pain.
Yeah. Okay. Those thoughts.
Exactly. All the people who've passed coronavirus around, they're to blame. All of that, it all detracts me from what's the actual point of all of it, being in connection with her, not missing a beat of her. She's here still now. How can I think of her, love her? Can I care for her in any way from afar? Is there anything I can do? That's the bit that's in my power.
Thank you. I think it's really important to get that clear, that we can question these things, even if something dreadful is happening and it's the truth that it's happening, we can still question our thoughts around it.
We can question our thoughts around what it means. So we're not questioning the circumstance. We're questioning, that's kind of built into the situation. That's built into life. It's questioning the argument with it.
Okay. Thank you. So sorry, I interrupted. So you were just move on to talk about, once you say, if we go back to the she's suffering, which we don't, don't know if that's true or not.
Yeah.
You then talk us through the turnaround.
Yeah. So turnarounds, there are a numbers of ways of doing this. The idea with the turnaround is that when we believe a thought, we're stuck in a certain paradigm, a certain way of seeing the situation. We think we are right and our perspective is right. And that's kind of the only way of seeing it. So what we do, we can look at in a few places. So one is we can look in the mirror and see, is this in any way a mirror for how I am showing up or feeling or treating myself? So if I've got the thought that my Oma is suffering, I can turn the mirror around to myself and look at I am suffering. Is that as true or truer? And I can see that, yes, I go into stress, disconnect. I do the diversion on Facebook thing. I don't respond to my dad's email. So yeah, I suffer. I actually disconnect from images of my Oma, the healthiest, happiest memories of her. So yeah, I am suffering. I can see that is a true reflection of what's going on in me. And then the other place I can go to is to the opposite. So could it be true that the opposite of my story is as true or truer? So she's not suffering. How could that be? And I want to try it on like trying on a new dress or a new coat or something. So what I see straight away is she's not suffering. She is in palliative care on huge levels of morphine. And if I read my dad's email really carefully, she's calm. That's what the email says. She's calm. She's on morphine. She's in end of life care. And I don't know that she's suffering. So I see evidence there in his email when I look back at it that she is not suffering. I also see that she has dementia. She wouldn't necessarily know her family even if we were there. So she's not suffering in the sense of being with strangers, because everyone's a stranger to her these days. So I keep looking, and I really want to get specific. This is not positive thinking. This is realistic thinking. It's about balancing out, because before we had this one belief that really was everything. And it's like, could there be any kind of counterbalance here, just so that we get a fuller perspective?
So are they the only two turnarounds that you do? Are there any more that any more new dresses to try on, or anything? I love that analogy.
Yeah, if it's a thought about somebody. Yeah. So let's say my thought was the nurses should be doing more. Yeah. Let's say let's make this even easier. Let's say the thought is, if I go to the postnatal ward with Sam, they should let my wife in, let's say. So is this going to be a good example? I want to get a good one here. Let's go for they won't let my wife in. So the turnaround to the mirror one is I won't let me in. Is there any way that I won't bring myself to my birth? If I'm constantly kind of complaining that Sam isn't there, yeah. I won't bring myself into the room. And then it's the turnaround to the other, bless you.
Excuse me.
Which is I won't bring the other person in. I won't maybe let the midwife in. I won't let Sam in. It's a mirror, but we can look at them, how we mirror it for ourselves and how we mirror it for other people as well. Okay. So it's like, this is how I treat myself, and this is also how I treat other people involved.
Okay. So the purpose of these turnarounds is just, and I know you've said this to me before, it's like being stuck in the mud and trying to just sort of loosen these things and just show you some stuff.
Yeah.
What other purpose do they have?
Well, because we have this confirmation bias, right? So if I believe my Oma is suffering,
yeah,
as I read through that email, I'm going to be focusing on the bits that are confirming that I'm right.
Yeah. Okay.
So I'll focus on words like laboured breathing or hasn't got long, and I'll focus on those, and I'll keep confirming to myself that my story is correct.
Mm.
Once I start opening my mind and looking for turnarounds, I then am also looking for evidence to the contrary. So let's go back to the postnatal ward. Let's think about, let's say I have a thought like, it would be better if Sam could be there after the birth, right? And that's like an assumption. Like, of course, it's going to be better that, my son's other mother is there after the birth. And so to start with, when I'm believing this thought, all my evidence is yes. I'm thinking about bonding and skin on skin, and I've got all these images of her, helping with this and doing this. But if I open to, is it maybe better that she's not there? If this is the reality that may occur, is there any way that it could be better that she's not there? I start looking, okay, well, she could go home and get some sleep. That might resource us better as a couple than actually her sleeping on the floor in the postnatal ward for 2-3 days, and then us both being completely knackered and useless by the time we get home. Any other reasons it's better that she's not there? Well, maybe she's then not exposed to the virus.
Mm-hmm.
And then, she's safe at home. Maybe she would have caught it, we wouldn't. And so you just start going, okay, maybe I wasn't completely right.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe there's another perspective. There's another way of looking at this situation. And you start kind of seeing, benefits of reality, benefits of what's actually happening.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So I can see how you've gone from, my grandmother's suffering to actually questioning that thought, and then actually then moving to action, because you're now no longer paralyzed by the thought.
Yep.
And you can actually go into action. And even if it was true, you'd then be questioning that she shouldn't be suffering, and
Yeah, and no one can do anything about it. Maybe I can think so much more creatively. Yeah. I can be so much more empowered because I'm back in my business, my power. What can I do? Mm-hmm. And finding the limits of that. Because when we argue with reality, we're arguing with something that isn't changeable.
Yeah.
But if we come back into, okay, but what can I do? Then we actually might find actions that are really clear, helpful, kind, brave, fearless.
Yeah. That's interesting. I'm just thinking of the thing that's going through my head at the moment is the problem that we've got, that there's not enough PPE, or there's not enough good PPE, or certainly I think they're getting more, but certainly GPs don't have enough,
Absolutely.
And I'm just wondering how that, because that might well be a fact, and people are getting angry about it, and I think righteous anger, there should be PPE. So how would you sort of work that sort of thought?
Yeah, let me write that down. There should be more PPE.
Yeah.
So that's a definite argument with reality statement, right?
Yeah.
And it doesn't do anything in and of itself. It doesn't do anything. So there should be more PPE. So I would sit with that. Okay, so is that true? There should be more PPE. Is that true? Can I know for sure that everything would be better if there was more of that equipment available? And I really might find yes. That's also fine to say, actually, yes, I do believe things would be much better if there was more of that equipment. Okay, so let's go with yes for now.
Okay.
How do I react when I believe it? Well, I get very angry. Mm-hmm. I blame the government. I have a good rant to, Sam about it, my friends about it. I look at politicians and I feel disgust. Yeah. So all of this, what happens for you when you believe that there should be?
I feel very sad and upset. I feel, very angry at the government for underfunding the NHS for so long and not preparing when they knew this was a possibility, for neglecting the very people that are in the front line, all, etc. Yeah. I guess anger.
And just notice how that shows up in your body. I know for me, like my jaw tends to get really set, like
guts.
Yeah. And then you just look at, what am I able to do with this thought? Am I effective? Does this thought kind of fuel really clear, powerful, compassionate activity, or does it just make me kind of withdraw and for me certainly like rant or complain or blame or feel disgusted? So does it, I don't know, for you, does it
well, it certainly doesn't move one to positive action, does it? It certainly does. There is nothing you can do about it. So it just makes you cross and stressed,
which is futile.
Whereas
actually, someone might have the thought, oh, there should be more PPE, and would then like take action, in which case it's not a stressful thought.
Okay. So if it's something people, you can take action on, it's not stressful anymore.
Well, I can just really picture that person, whoever that person is or people are, who just go, right, there should be more of this. Okay, let's do that. Let's, get creative. Let's talk to this person. Let's talk to this manufacturer. Let's talk to this government official. And then it doesn't become an argument with reality. Whereas if we're sitting at home going, there should be more PPE, it's useless. It's absolutely futile.
There is nothing you can do about that. Yeah.
No, absolutely. So that's the bit to notice for. Does this make me powerful, or does this make me argue with something that is immovable?
Okay. And then where would you go with it?
Well, so who would I be without the thought there should be more PPE, without the stressful version of that thought? Well, maybe I would just see really clearly, this is the reality. What can I do? Right. So you wouldn't be arguing with what's happening. It would be, okay, this is what's happening. What can I do? Can I talk? Just that creativity that might then come. I mean, if you imagine yourself without the argument with it, anything at all like creative or problem solving that comes to mind for you?
Well, I think you'd go off into action about then how can I protect my staff best? And how do we operate? So if you're thinking of GP surgery, how do we operate as a surgery without this? What changes do we need to make? It's like, this is the reality, so therefore what do we need to do? It's just so much more sane than us sitting there going, oh, this shouldn't be happening, and then just kind of fighting through the situation that this is happening, what should we do? And that's not necessarily going to be easy, I guess, if I think back to with Alfie, when Alfie died, this shouldn't be happening. Well, it is. He's died. So now what do we want to do? Do we want to get a photographer to come and take photos? What kind of funeral do we want to plan? Whereas if I'd sat there saying, this shouldn't be happening, I wouldn't have been able to put things in place around the reality that it has just happened. And where's the role for emotion in all of this? Because I know I was talking to, in the previous podcast, we were talking about the importance of allowing ourselves to feel sad and allowing ourselves to feel angry and upset. Where does that fit into all of this?
Well, I think for me, there are different kinds of emotions. When I'm believing a thought and I'm in the stress of that, the emotion that comes isn't actually really being expressed. It's generally being kept in the body as an ongoing resentment or a stress or a fight, a resistance. It's not actually getting expression in any way. Whereas, if I'm thinking about with After Alfie, I would do yoga classes and just cry, but it wasn't stressful crying. It was like love-filled, just pure grief, just kind of falling onto the yoga mat. But it didn't hurt. You know, it didn't feel stuck, because it wasn't a belief generated emotion.
Okay.
It was just an energy flowing through of love, sadness, compassion, grief. All of that was kind of just pouring out. And then it would stop, and then I would feel bizarre that I didn't feel heavy or sad. I was then feeling joyful and just connected.
You released those emotions, right?
The emotion just came through, and there was no judgment that it was a right or wrong emotion. It was just, oh, this is what's happening.
So the point of the work isn't to suppress our emotions and not feel stuff. It's to get rid of the stress and the abnormal suppression of the emotions.
Absolutely. And there was a moment, and it's not just sadness. There was a moment in our post-mortem review, when we had the post-mortem conversation with the doctors after he died, where both my wife and I felt pure anger, pure anger at something that had been done. But it wasn't stressful anger. It was just really pure, directed, this is what needs to happen. And this, so it didn't cause us pain in that sense. Later, when then the thoughts kicked in of, well, this shouldn't have happened and they shouldn't have done that, and then that felt stressful. But actually, pure sadness, pure anger, pure fear, they're just natural human emotions, and they come through, and they often actually don't stay very long. Both those examples I'm giving there of the sadness on the mat and the anger in the post-mortem were very short-lived. That's the pure emotion.
Yeah. I think so often we are afraid of experiencing those emotions, aren't we? We're so frightened of, well, we're happy to experience good, positive emotions. We're not very happy to experience negative emotions, aren't we?
Yeah, absolutely. I've written a book. It's not finished yet, but I've written a book about Alfie and our journey with him. And I would write, and I would just cry my whole way through writing, and it didn't bother me that I was crying, because it was just, that was what was coming through. And I think that's one of the ways that I kind of traveled that, those first few months really healthily, was just letting it all pour out without any judgment that I should be feeling anything different or doing anything different. So I think, for a lot of us, maybe even all of us, right now we are experiencing grief, collective grief. So many things that we were hoping for, plans we had, or a life that we thought we were having, has been removed from us. People's weddings, people's travel plans, people being at people's funerals, or things to do with work that maybe they've had a really wonderful full self-employment kind of thing all lined up. Maybe they're a wedding makeup person, or just gone. And that is loss, and loss brings grief. It just very healthily brings grief. So if we can all feel that grief, it's a really healthy thing.
Yeah. So immediately I'm thinking, people will be thinking, I shouldn't feel sad. I shouldn't feel this grief. But actually, if you love someone, you should feel the grief, and it's a good thing, because you love them.
Absolutely.
It's good. Yeah.
Absolutely. And your life, you love your life, and you love the plans you had for your life.
Yeah.
So if you now look at, wow, I'm not gonna, so for me, wow, my mum and dad and Sam's mum and dad won't probably get to hold their grandson for months. And just to feel, that's, the sadness of that, it's not a blocked energy, it's the opposite. It's a release of that. The sadness of that. And then it's gone.
Yeah. So I find this process of the work really interesting. And I think that some people who are listening might think this is slightly weird, or slightly, that came out wrong. No, slightly different. Because I know when I first encountered the work, I thought I was like, what is this? Is it really that simple? Just asking those questions.
Yeah.
But I think it is very clever, in that these questions have been very carefully distilled down, haven't they?
Well, because they hit, I think for me, they hit the key points. Is anytime we're having a thought or a story, is it true? What does it cost us, and who would we be without it? It is simple in that sense. And then what could be happening instead of what we think is happening?
Yeah.
And it has been distilled, and it has been practiced for Byron Katie, who developed the work, or kind of came to the work in 1986. This has been around for that many years, with tens of thousands of people around the world in every situation, every situation, whether it's cancer, suicide, affairs, everything you can think of, physical pain, job loss, annoying partners, the biggest and the smallest and everything in between. It just seems to work, but you need to have an open mind to know that your stories are stories, they're not facts.
Yeah. And I think for me, that's the thing I've struggled to get my head around the most, is this whole concept that it's not the things that cause me suffering, it's my thinking about the things that cause the suffering. And watching a few of Brian Katie's, videos online, people saying, well, my husband's just divorced me. And she's saying, well, that's not what's causing you suffering. No. That's just something that's happened. It's all those stories that are going on in your head about why he did and he doesn't. I'm unlovable, and all those sorts of things. Yeah, and the reason that you find it weird, or people might find it weird, is because this is very countercultural. Yeah, we're very, very used to thinking that things make us happy or sad. We use it in our language all the time. He made me angry. She made me upset. He did that to me. We have a real tendency for victim mentality, kind of justified victim mentality, that life does these things to us and life makes us feel certain ways. So it's a real unlearning to see, and I think you can only see it when you see it, that it's not life that's doing that. It's not the circumstances. It's the stories about the circumstances that are causing the suffering. Yeah. Something that really helped me recently, it's this book, and I've mentioned this before, I don't know if you've seen it, Corrina, called The Happiness Trap. And what it does, it's very similar to the work in that sort of talk about your thoughts and if you fuse with your thoughts or not, but just getting you to notice those stories by saying, first of all, oh, I'm having the thought that my grandmother is suffering, or if you want to go another level, it's I notice that I am having the thought that my grandmother is suffering, to help you separate the thoughts from, well, just to notice that it is the thought and it's separate, and you're almost observing yourself having that thought. I found that quite helpful. Yeah, absolutely. I like to imagine thoughts. There are two main images that I use for myself and with clients. One is that thoughts are like clouds passing by, and we just often seem to hook onto one and kind of travel with that thought. The other image I use is, like in Yo Sushi, the conveyor belt of food that goes round. And it's like, they're like thoughts, and we take one and we buy one, and we have to pay for whatever we take. And actually we could just let the thoughts travel around the conveyor belt. We could just let those clouds keep going by. Yeah. So I think if you can think of thoughts as separate from you, because we're so accustomed to thinking that they're just reality, because we just believe them by default. I am my thoughts, also I am my feelings. I'm feeling sad, therefore something must be wrong. Right. Yes. And it's interesting that sushi conveyor belt, you can choose to leave that thought, even if it's a true thought. Yeah, absolutely. Right? Yeah, absolutely. Like you would in a sushi restaurant. Like, I love that aubergine, and today I'm not paying for that one today. Doesn't mean it's not valid, but just I'm not gonna jump on that plate today. Yeah, I think that's another way that we can help protect ourselves is, I've done a podcast recently about not devouring massive amount of social media and news. Yeah. Because you're automatically putting your head in a particular space where you're going to attach yourself to these thoughts of, isn't it awful? We're all going to, this is terrible. This is terrible. Well, the scary thing about social media and the news is that actually, as we're scrolling, we often scroll so quickly that we're not aware that so many stories we've bought so many stories. By the time we get to the end, it's very hard to unpick. Hang on, I'm feeling something. I'm feeling uneasy, unsettled, like I want to reach for chocolate, or whatever that feeling is. Because actually, probably, which story was it? Yeah, exactly. 10 minutes ago, we probably read one line that said something about, I don't know, this is going to last for 6 months, and then we just kept scrolling, and we didn't notice that actually we believed that, and our whole system was having a response to that line. But now we've gone on to read about, Boris Johnson contracting this, and then we've gone on to read about the impact on plant growers in Shropshire, and by the end of it,
our body's in complete overload because we've been having reactions to every one of those stories. So it's absolutely slow down, be very, very mindful and conscious about consuming news, social media in bite-sized enough chunks that we can actually be present to our thoughts in relation to what we're reading or watching.
That's really good advice. Now, Corrina, I know we haven't got very long left. So if someone was to want to start this process of the work, trying to look at their own thoughts, do they need a therapist or can they sort of do it by themselves?
So Byron Katie has made everything available at thework.com. That's her website. Mm-hmm. So you'll see her, you'll see the 4 questions. There are resources there, like there's a sheet called the Judge Your Neighbour worksheet, which is a structure for dumping your thoughts about a particular person or situation. There are huge amounts of YouTube videos out there of Katie working with people. So if you want a way into the work, that's definitely a great place to start. There is the Do the Work Helpline. So that is a 24/7 helpline with those of us, including myself, who staff that for free from around the world. So people can call that helpline and do the work with someone. Mm-hmm. People aren't always available, but when they are, then you can do the work with them. And then there are people like me and many others who are facilitators of the work. Mm-hmm. So then if you want support, and I personally have a facilitated session of the work pretty much every day, through my network of colleagues or by paying for that as well, paying for people to sit with me, so that I'm doing it's like daily flossing. It's like if I'm going to floss my teeth every day, I want to sit with my thoughts every day. So you can find me, you can find others who facilitate the work. Yeah.
And we'll definitely put Corrina's email address, although you've got 3 weeks left.
Yeah, I'm here now, and then at certain points within my maternity leave, I will be doing work days. So yeah,
okay. So
get in touch at any point because I can always reply when I'm on maternity leave.
So you will be available to do stuff.
I'll be here.
Yeah, and if people were just going to take 1 or 2 questions away from this session that would be helpful for them to ask themselves, what would you suggest those questions would be?
So maybe I would say, am I in this moment arguing with reality?
Okay.
And then how effective is that?
Okay.
I think in a situation like this where the circumstances are so clear and there are so many facts and so much evidence of what's happening in the world, I think that would be a really good place to look. Yeah. Am I arguing with reality, and how effective is that? And I guess then, and then what would be an alternative to arguing with reality? If I wasn't arguing with reality right now, how might I feel and what might I be able to do?
Yeah. And I know when I've done the work with you, questions I found particularly effective are, who am I with this thoughts?
Yeah.
And who would I be without this thoughts?
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Same situation, same me, but here's the version of me with the story running. Here's the version of me without the story running. What is now actually in my power without the story running?
Yeah. And it doesn't get rid of the thought, but it makes it have less power over you, doesn't it, in a weird way?
Well, you kind of can look at the thought then and go, oh, you're interesting. Hello. You're a thought. I'm going to contemplate you, but I'm not just going to eat you. Or
yes. Oh, I noticed I'm having that thought again. Oh, off you go.
Yeah, interesting. And actually, if you've really questioned the truth of a thought and you've gone through this process, often you look back, I've got a diary that I always write all my work in, and I'll look back at things and think, gosh, I used to believe that. That's strange. I couldn't believe it now because I've questioned it to the extent where it just doesn't have any Velcro to it.
Well, thank you so much, Corrina. That's it's been really helpful to me, and I hope it's helpful to some listeners. We're just trying to throw out as much stuff out there that could be helpful to people. So, if you're interested in this, I just really encourage you to go and have a look at thework.com, get in touch with Corrina. We'll give you her email address, and you have a website as well, Corrina.
Yeah, so it's my name, CorrinaGordonBarnes.com.
Yeah, so get in touch with Corrina as well, because this stuff it's really powerful, and I've seen massive breakthroughs, not in my own life, but in friends' lives who've gone through doing the work with Corrina. So Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
And good luck.
Thank you.
3 weeks' time with the
Yeah.
little one.
Oh.
And I would love to have you back on the podcast at some point. I think there's a lot more to talk about with this.
Perfect. I'll be back.
Thank you. Thanks for listening. If you've enjoyed this episode, then please share it with your friends and colleagues. Please subscribe to my You Are Not a Frog email list and subscribe to the podcast. And if you have enjoyed it, then please leave me a rating wherever you listen to your podcasts. So keep well, everyone. You're doing a great job. You got this.